Good evening, Apollo Baptist Church and others that are viewing this vlog. I hope that you could be encouraged from spending some moments looking into God's Word. Our reading plan at Apollo Baptist Church this week is 1 Corinthians chapter 10, 11, and 12. 3 chapters. And you will remember, if you've been reading in 1 Corinthians, that the church at Corinth had some real pride issues. They challenged the Apostle Paul regarding his authority. They were resistant to one another. They were not submissive. And God is challenging them through the Apostle Paul to seek God's way rather than their way, and to avoid the arrogancy that their pride was leading them in. And beyond that, it was causing their church to have massive divisions and separations. There was not unity that God wanted them to enjoy. Last week, I spoke to you out of 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 24 and following. And the Apostle Paul personalized what he was saying to them, that he himself wanted to be humble before God so that he himself would not be disqualified from being what God wanted him to be. Well, in the chapter 10, in the first major section, the Apostle Paul continues that thought, and he is just warning the Christians at Corinth to be humble. And he uses the Old Testament as the backdrop of how God was with the Israelites, and yet many of them were not with God. And even though they had experienced great things from God, as had the Corinthian church, they still missed fellowshipping with God. And so our religious experiences, no matter how good they are, might not be the real evidence of God working in our lives, in our situation. Let me read to you some of these verses, starting in verse 1, chapter 10. I do not want you to be unaware, brethren, that our fathers were all under the cloud, and all passed through the sea, and were all baptized into Moses in the cloud and in the sea. And all ate the same spiritual food, and all drank the same spiritual drink, for they were drinking from the spiritual rock which followed after them. And the rock was Christ. Nevertheless, even though they had experienced such great things from God, nevertheless, with most of them, God was not well pleased, and they were laid low in the wilderness. We know that most of the Israelites, all of them 20 years old and older, did not get into the promised land because they rebelled against God. The only 2 exceptions was Joshua and Caleb. And so all of the religious experiences, while they were phenomenal, did not cause them to experience God's closeness and his usability. Verse 6. Now, these things happened as examples for us. He's talking about Old Testament situations, so that we would not crave evil things as they also craved. Do not be idolaters, as some of them were, as it is written, the people sat down to eat and drank and stood up to play. Nor let us act immorally, as some of them did, and 23,000 fell in one day. It was a situation where God judged the people because of their immorality. Nor let us try the Lord, as some of them did, and were destroyed by serpents. That's when they were grumbling against God. Nor grumble as some of them did, and were destroyed by the destroyer. Now these things happened to them as an example, and they were written for our instruction. Oh, so God dealt with the people in the Old Testament. He cared for them. He showed himself to them. He provided for them. And when they did not walk with him, he disciplined them. He disciplined them so that they would experience his greatness. And these things were written down as examples for the Corinthians and for us. God's word is true. And the fact that it happened a long time ago doesn't change, because God doesn't change. And they become examples to us in the reality that the same God that dealt with them is the same God that will deal with us. So we need to learn from how our God works. And we need to humble ourselves and let God be exalted in our life rather than self being exalted. Verse 12, therefore let him who thinks he stands take heed that he does not fall. That is that classic passage on pride. If you think you can stand, if you think you got it together, you're going to fall, because you and I don't have what it takes to do this on our own. And the Corinthians were falling big time, and Paul is warning them to stop it. And then he says, no temptation has overtaken you, but such is common to man, and God is faithful, and who will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able, but with the temptation will provide a way of escape also, so that you will be able to endure it. Our God is with us, and he knows that we're in enemy territory, and he knows that we are constantly being tempted. And the promise is he will not allow us to be tempted beyond what we are able. I don't know how much that is, because I don't see myself as being able to be tempted very much without caving in. But I think what's really being said here is, if you are humble, then our God will cause you to not go where you cannot stand. But if you are not humble, then you are at the mercy of this evil world, and you will be taken for a bad ride. And so I think the promise is for those who are humble. Those who are arrogant, they're going to fall big time. But those who are humble, there is a way out of the temptation. But those who are arrogant, baby, it's not going to be good. So we have a warning from the Apostle Paul, God through the Apostle Paul, but he uses the Old Testament to try to get the attention of God's people. I love passages like this because it speaks to the truth of God's Word. God's Word is true. The Apostle Paul believed it. Jesus believed it, referred to it as fact. We need to lean on it as absolute fact. But beyond that, we need to humble ourselves before our God. Don't be proud. Don't be arrogant. Don't think you can do this on your own. If you think you can stand, you're already down. God will give you what it takes to escape temptation if you're humble enough to seek God. All right. Keep your heart in the book. Keep your eyes looking to Jesus. And I'll see you next week.